Dear learners, I would like to welcome you all to this lecture on agricultural taxation, scope and importance. This is part of our MOOC course on agricultural economics. So this lecture is included in module 6. So in module 6 we have already discussed in our previous lectures, that is agricultural price policy and agricultural price policy in India, the consideration which we should take for determining the prices of agricultural goods. Now, in this lecture, basically we will concentrating on the issue of agricultural taxation. So I will start this lecture with introduction. Then I will try to explain what is agricultural taxation, what are the types of agricultural taxes, what is the scope of agricultural taxation, and the importance of agricultural taxation. So before we start taxation specific to agriculture, it is necessary to explain what is tax. So tax is basically a compulsory payment for which there is no direct return on the part of the government. So basically what government do, government imposes various kinds of taxes and non-taxes on citizens of a country or a nation, whatever, for making expenditure on different activities. So that is why what basically the main purpose of taxes is to make scope for making developmental expenditure. Now, when you are talking about the composition of GDP or GSDP of a country, it basically consists of three sectors: agricultural and allied activities, then secondary sector and tertiary sectors. Now, it is generally if you see the literature, particularly in developing countries, the scope of taxation in agriculture is basically very low. The main reason for this is that most of the activities, particularly in agriculture sector, they are always in the subsistence level. So as a result, the scope for taxation is very less in case of agriculture. And another issue is the issue of food security. Now, the main purpose of agriculture is to providing nutritious food to the citizens. Now, if excessive taxation on agriculture is imposed, this may have a repercussion in terms of fall in production of agricultural activity, which ultimately lead to the food crisis. So as a result, while discussing any issue related to agricultural taxation, lots of precaution has to be taken. But at the same time, it is also true that agriculture plays a crucial role in the economy of many countries. For example, if you consider a country in India where around 70% of the people still involved in agricultural sector, but at the same time, we should give importance on the fact that there is a huge imbalances between number of people involved in agriculture and their contribution towards GSDP. So why it is happening? Because if you see the agricultural, considered to the number of people involved, the contribution of agriculture towards GDP in India, for example, India is gradually declining. This is because agriculture is still at the subsistence level. But the issue is, it is the agricultural sector which provide food, raw materials for industries and employment opportunities to a large segment of the population. So however, despite this importance, the agricultural sector often faces various challenges that makes it difficult to ensure full economic potential. So one such aspect is agricultural taxation, which I have already mentioned. So basically that is why this lecture will explore the scope and importance of agricultural taxation, giving emphasis on its impact on economic development, policy implementation and social equity. Now, we'll start with understanding agricultural taxation. I have already explained what taxation is all about. Now, I will explain taxation in terms of specific to agriculture. So, agricultural taxation in simple language we can refer as taxes imposed on agricultural commodities, including production, sale, and income derived from agricultural activities. So these taxes may apply to various aspects of farming, such as ownership of land, production levels, agricultural export, and agricultural income. Now, what are the different types of agricultural taxes? So whenever we are talking about agricultural taxes, it can be subdivided into different categories, such as land tax, income tax, sale tax on agricultural product, excise duty, property tax, value-added tax, etc. Now, what is land tax in case of agriculture? So, land tax in case of agriculture is the tax based on the value or size of land owned or used for agricultural production. So, based on the size of the land, there is a scope for there is a kind of tax that can be imposed on land. Next important type of tax which is related to agriculture is the income tax. Now, tax levied on income generated from agricultural activities is basically known as income tax. So, there is a debate between whether we should impose income tax on agricultural activities. This is because if you consider a country like India and for that purpose other underdeveloped countries, the amount of income generated from agriculture is comparatively very less. So, as a result, there is a very less scope for imposing any kind of tax on agricultural activities. So, that is why it is, if you see the literature on agricultural taxation, it's seen that in case of India, the income tax on agricultural activities is almost zero. Now, another tax which is imposed on agricultural activities is the sales tax, that is tax on sale of agricultural products. There is a scope for excise duty also which can be applied on agricultural activities. That is applied to specific agricultural product or processes often at the point of sale or export. So, what happens when farmers grow different kind of crops, and when they sell those products as a final product in different market, those kind of taxes can be imposed. So, another important tax on agriculture is the property tax, that is which is imposed on agricultural land and infrastructure owned by the farmers. So, it generally happens that although we are saying that agriculture in underdeveloped countries is always at the subsistence level, but the thing is that among the farmers also, we often observe that there are some of the farmers who are quite rich, but some of the farmers, their income level is quite low. So, there is always a scope for imposing some kind of property tax on the farmers whose income level is above the certain benchmark. Now, if you see the literature on a theoretical point of view also, there is a scope for, we can also explain the imposition of value-added tax in agricultural activities which can be applied to agricultural value chain including input and output. Now, what is the need or scope of agricultural taxation? Now, any kind of taxes, the purpose is to generate revenue. So, in case of those countries which are basically dependent on agricultural activities, obviously what happens, it is expected that that sector where more than 70% of the people or 60% of the people, more than half of the people are involved in that particular sector, it is generally expected that that sector will give some kind of revenue to the government. So, that is why government revenue generation, there is a scope for government revenue generation from agricultural taxation from theoretical point of view. This is because agricultural taxation helps government to raise funds for public services such as infrastructure development and other sectors of the economy. So, given that, agriculture, considering those above situation, agriculture is a significant contributor to the GDP in many countries. So, that is why taxing agricultural sector can provide a stable and predictable source of income to the government. That income can be used by the government for different developmental activities either in social sector or economic sector. So, another important scope of agricultural taxation is the regulation of agricultural practices. So, what happens? Taxes is imposed on different goods and services mainly to two purposes. One is to collect revenue which can be spent on developmental activities which I have already explained, and another important purpose of imposing taxes is to divert some kind of activities from unproductive to productive, from socially undesirable to socially desirable. So, that is why regulation is another part of putting some kind of regulation, another part of imposing taxes. So, in case of agriculture also, taxes can be used as tools for regulating agricultural practice. So, let me give you a simple example. So, taxes on certain chemicals, fertilizers, pesticide use may help to promote sustainable farming practices by encouraging farmers to adopt environmentally friendly methods. So, another important scope, or you can say purpose of agriculture taxation is to income redistribution. Agriculture taxes can help to address income disparities. So in countries with large agricultural sector, income generated from taxes can be redistributed in rural areas in the form of subsidies on different goods, different welfare scheme and infrastructure development, and that ultimately lead to improving standard of living for farmers and other communities living in those countries. So encouraging economic diversification is another scope or need of agricultural taxation. So what happens? Taxation can be used as a tool for promoting diversification within agriculture. Sometimes it is necessary that to make a balance between commercial crops and food crops, we need some kind of diversification. So that is why then in that case taxation is considered as a appropriate tool to diversify activities within agriculture. So in those cases, what government can do? Government can offer tax breaks or exemption for farmers who invest in, say, value-added agriculture, agro-processing, or diversification of crops, so leading to economic resilience in that particular sector. Another important scope of agricultural taxation is the agricultural trade and export. Agricultural export are often subject to taxes or duties. So agricultural taxation in the form of export taxes or subsidies can influence international trade, affecting the competitiveness of the nation's agricultural product in global market. So that is another scope of agricultural taxation on the point of view of international trade. Now, another aspect which can be considered as a scope of agricultural taxation is the supporting environmental goals. So what happens? Environmental taxes related to agriculture can help government to achieve sustainability goals. For example, if the taxes on water uses or carbon emission from large-scale agricultural activities can encourage more efficient use of resources. So in that way, agricultural taxation can support or help to attain environmental goal. So after explaining the scope of agricultural taxation, now we will try to explain the importance of agricultural taxation. Now, the first issue to explain agricultural taxation or importance of agricultural taxation is the economic development or growth. Agricultural taxation provides government with funds that can be invested in agricultural infrastructure, irrigation system, rural road and technological advancement. So that is why there is a need to collect some kind of revenue from agricultural sector in terms of taxes, which can be invested in agricultural infrastructure, irrigation system, rural road and technological advancement. But the problem is that, as I have already explained, the scope of taxing agricultural sector is very limited because most of the farmers in a country like India are in a subsistence level. So that is why their ability to tax is very limited. So that is why on the policy perspective, what the government have to do, government has to make a differentiate between the farmers who are living at the subsistence level and the farmers whose income is sufficiently large, which can pay some amount of taxes to the government. So those taxes or the revenue from those taxes can be invested, and those investments are crucial to boosting agricultural productivity, enhancing food security and promoting overall economic growth. Now, second importance of agricultural taxation is the ensuring fairness and equity. So fair tax system help in reducing inequality between different sectors of the economy. So while agricultural workers and farmers may not always earn the same as those in other industries, taxation can be used to ensure that the agricultural sector contributes proportionately. So, although it may not be possible to contribute proportionally, but some amount of contribution to national development. Now, another important issue which can be considered as the importance of agricultural taxation is balancing agricultural subsidies. So, what happens? Many government provide subsidies to the agricultural sector to support farmer, particularly in times of crisis such as national disaster, crop failure. So that is why taxation on agricultural profit or land ownership can offset those subsidies because it will give some kind of revenue to the government. So that will ensure that agricultural sector remain competitive and efficient. Now, another important issue which can be considered as the importance of agricultural sector is the revenue for rural development. So what happens? It generally happens that the income level of the people residing in rural areas is comparatively less as compared to the urban areas, because their scope for employment is comparatively limited. But whatever employment opportunities they have, that will not provide them a sufficient amount of income. So that is why revenue generation in rural areas, particularly in underdeveloped countries, is comparatively very less. So that is why in countries where rural areas form a large portion of population, agricultural taxation becomes an essential source of revenue that can be reinvested into rural development. So this revenue can fund educational program, healthcare services, and improve access to technology for rural farmers, because those kind of activities, for as I have already explained, kind of educational program, healthcare services, they are very scarce in rural areas. Promoting sustainable agriculture is also considered as another importance of agricultural taxation. So taxes on environmentally harmful agricultural practices, as I have already explained while explaining the scope of agricultural taxation, that is taxation on environmentally harmful agricultural practices such as excessive use of pesticide and fertilizer can incentivize farmers to adopt more sustainable and eco-friendly farming methods. So that the revenue from these taxes can also be used to funding research into new sustainable agricultural practices. So that is why it is considered as another important issue of while we discuss any issue related to agricultural taxation. Now another issue is addressing land use and land ownership issue. So land taxes are a tool to address land ownership and land use pattern. What happens in many countries, land ownership is concentrated among a few wealthy individuals or corporations, which can lead to inefficient land use or socio-economic inequality. This happens in case of India also, because there is a huge disparity in distribution of land among different categories of farmers. So now what it can be done, land taxes can serve or can be used to redistribute land more equitably, improving the lives of small scale farmers. So after discussing the importance of agricultural taxation, now we will try to explain what are the challenges of agricultural taxation. The first or the important challenge of agricultural taxation is the inaccurate tax assessment. So what happens in agricultural sector, it is often agricultural sector is basically informal or fragmented. So that is why it making it difficult to assess the income or production or land holding of farmers. So this result provide difficulties in tax collection and enforcement. Another important challenge of agricultural taxation is the exemption or tax breaks. So in many countries, the agricultural sectors enjoy special exemption and reduced tax rate due to the strategic importance. It happens in India also. So while this may be intended to protect farmers, obviously it's true, but it can lead to inefficient and loss of revenue to the government. That is another important challenge of agricultural taxation. Vulnerability of farmers can also be considered as a challenge of agricultural taxation. So what happens? Taxing agricultural income can disproportionately affect small farmers who are already struggling with the productivity, fluctuating market prices, and natural disasters. So in such cases, tax policies should be designed to protect those vulnerable groups. But the problem is how to design those tax policies. That is another important challenge of agricultural taxation. Another important issue which can be considered as a challenge for agricultural taxation is the political and social resistance. So farmers, particularly in developing countries, may resist in agricultural taxation due to fear of increased financial burdens or lack of understanding about the benefit. So that is why political resistance can also be issue for implementing agricultural taxation policies. So that is why it is considered as an important challenge while discussing any issue related to agricultural taxation. So that is why, after discussing the scope, the importance and challenges of agricultural taxation, so in conclusion, what we can say, agricultural taxation plays a pivotal role in economic development and social welfare of a country. There is no doubt about that. But the problem is that while its scope is broad, in theoretical point of view, so covering aspects like government revenue generation, environmental regulation, and rural development, it also requires careful consideration to avoid negative impact on small-scale farmers. So that is why the properly designed agricultural taxation policies can foster fairness, sustainability, and growth within the agricultural sectors while contributing to overall prosperity of the nations. So what we can say, there is no doubt that some kind of taxation in agriculture is essential for generating income revenue, regulating the sector, and promoting fairness and sustainability. But the thing is that while framing those policies, the authority has to be very cautious. They have to see the interest of the small and marginal farmers. So its scope includes land tax, income tax, sale tax, we have already explained, and it also plays a key role in addressing income inequality and promoting economic diversification. So thus, in conclusion, what we can say, agricultural taxation can play or help in development, but it must be carefully structured to support small farmers and promote sustainable practices. Thank you.